Great, guys. I get an edible. This is an edible, Rosanne.
Oh, really? Good for you.
A little bit more
I had one.
I should have said it to you as a Christmas present. Okay, so we should be on the air. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Real Zagami Show. What can I say? Today we have with us for the first time the one and only Rosanne Barr. I'm chewing my gummy here. However, John is with us, Lowell is with us. We are still missing the priest from London. I don't know. Hopefully he's going to join us too later on. Welcome, everybody. And, of course, first of all, Rosanne, thank you for being with us today. Thanks for
having me.
For joining this incredible, eccentric panel. And we have, of course, something very sad that has happened to the Jewish community. Everybody's talking about it. And this guy with a machete arriving is just one of the many anti-Semitic attacks that in the last few weeks New York is being a victim of. And it's an increasing problem in the area because of a group, these Black Israelites, who basically claim they are the real ones. And it's like a really sad thing because in the end, they are not really the majority of the media doesn't want to really address the real problem here.
No.
So I think that we should talk about it just to open up, of course, to break the ice with our viewers. But it's really sad to see that on the 7th day of this Hanukkah, this important festivity that you celebrate in the Jewish community, this guy arrives with an axe, with a machete, and start this slaughter. I mean, and a few weeks ago we had the shooting at the kosher shop, but when they saw, when the media saw that it wasn't the classic white supremacist, they immediately dismissed the whole thing. So it's also a question here to do with the way it has to fit in the narrative to then expose the problem. But this doesn't fit in the narrative in some way. So, Rosanne, first of all, welcome and thank you for being with us again. And tell us your opinion on this latest sad event of anti-Semitism.
Well, it was the 7th night of Hanukkah, and the 7th night is about this world. So it's the reality of this world. I think that was put into our face. That is the reality of this world, and it is becoming increasingly more common occurrence in the United States of America, which that's what's so terrible because America, you know, I just continually pray for the soul of America, of the United States, and that it stays connected to source and doesn't fall by the wayside through mind control programming meant to separate us all and push us all off the cliff into darkness, total darkness. So, you know, it is the reality of this world and the reality of our country. And there were something like 70,000 anti-Semitic incidents in the United States in the last, I think, 3 years. And, you know, the Jews are the ultimate minority because we're only 1% of the population here. And for some reason, we're left out of the entire narrative when it comes to talking about minorities, which right there is suspect. But, you know, I think that, you know, to attack people when they're praying in their holy place, you know, in their synagogues or their temples or their mosques during a time of their sacred holidays is the reality that we're facing in America. And it's come to America and it's, you know, all over Europe. So now it's come here. And what are we going to do about it?
Thank you for this, of course, first reaction. I've picked up before we started a video in which the governor was saying after the attack at the kosher shop, oh, the problem is solved, everything is fine, there is not an alarm here, you shouldn't be alarmed by the situation. But in the last few weeks, the attacks have continued. Even little children in the street have been attacked, and all kinds of things. So this is a really disturbing thing that is happening, because on one side we have this minority, these Black Israelites who have a weird history, I mean, of claiming some kind of Jewish connection. They are not recognized by, of course, the traditional Jewish environment. And then we have also, of course, the growing problem also in those areas where we have a large Muslim population, because it seems like they're also very much into anti-Semitism. And we see it also from their representatives, especially the Democrats, AOC plus 3, and all those people who, of course, are marrying into this anti-Semitism like Jeremy Corbyn did in Great Britain. So we despise all this. And of course, Governor Cuomo instead today had to immediately make it very clear: any crime against us is a crime against America, a place where we come so we can all be free to practice whatever religion it may pleases us. Isn't that the case, Rosanna? So it is truly sad to see that. And Lowell, down in Jerusalem, what are they saying about this increasing problem that we're having here in the United States?
First of all, I want to wish you and John and the special guest star for this evening, Roseanne, Hanukkah Sameach. It's the 8th and final night of Hanukkah here in my time, because I'm 10 hours ahead of you, and Reverend David Parry is, I know he's coming on. We were just talking beforehand. He's 2 hours behind in London, England's green and pleasant land. This week is, it's now the second day of Tevet, the new Israelite month of Tevet of the year 5780. And I'd also like to say that it's a special privilege to be talking to the biblical Boudica. Boudica was who led the revolt, the Iceni against the Romans. They regard Roseanne as the biblical Boudica, Esther, Dvorah, Hannah, and high priestess of heaven. See, it's easy for me to say things. I mean everything I say. So that is how I feel. And so this is a very special evening. As far as the attacks are concerned, whenever these kinds of incidents would happen, and I would mention them to my father, that's Lieutenant Colonel Martin Gallen. That was him in World War II when he was a captain. Then he retired as Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserves. Abogado, 50 years of life on the street. His body died in October 2018. Souls don't die. And he was one of two members of the Jabotinsky Beitar movement in the 1930s at City College, and then became a lifelong supporter of Meir Kahane in the 1960s, at which a tradition I continue, as does my son-in-law. And whenever there would be an attack, such as there was an attack in France and Toulouse, some rabbis were massacred a few years ago, he would say, in Auschwitz, was it any different? Meaning that people vilify and murder Jews is nothing new. That we have the capacity for self-defense, that's new. And that is new. So the fact that Jews are murdered is not new. Also, please keep in mind, before these attacks started on synagogues in the last few years in the United States, I was wondering how long it would take, because for the last 10 or 15 years, there have been repeated massacres in churches all over the country.
Right.
And I would advise the Christians and the regular Sunni and Shiite, not Wahhabi Muslims, that's where the problem's coming from. You need, like the JDL, the Jewish Defense League, or I would say Israelite Defense League, we're 12 tribes. Everybody should have what Israel has, Mishmar Ezrachi, Civil Guard. The police can't be everywhere all the time. It's impossible. So what you need is to weaponize in a positive way the citizenry, as per the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms.
Absolutely.
The right to bear arms. It says Israel went up armed out of Egypt. They say, with all the things they had to do running out of Egypt, why does it mention that? Slaves don't carry weapons. They also can't read and write. They can read and write, you kill them. You don't let them have weapons. There were no slave revolts during Israelite history in the land of Israel, because slaves were treated pretty well. In the Roman and the Greek and other worlds, there was constant fear of slave revolts. Spartacus, there was no Spartacus in the Judean and Israelite kingdom. So what I would say is everyone should, in every community in the United States, arm your citizens, train them how to use weapons. My father, I asked him about that. He worked in El Barrio, the South Bronx, from 1952 to 2000. His clients were blacks, Puerto Ricans, people from the islands. That's why the book is called Abogado. It means lawyer in Spanish. 50 years on the street. They called it the street. And I said, Daddy, what do you think about gun control? He said, gun control only controls regular people having the guns. The bad guys always get the guns.
Right.
So you want to arm your citizens, train them how to use the weapons.
You know, in Europe,
self-defense.
When I went, every synagogue has had a van in front of it to protect it. And, you know, we know that there were armed people in the van. And you can, you know, I don't understand why in America that isn't happening. It's a clear and present danger. So why are they not protecting themselves and the people inside their synagogues with, you know, armed force? I mean, definitely they can do that. And my sister works for the Jewish Federation. Her spouse does, and says the Jewish Federation offers grants to help synagogues and Jewish places of gathering protect themselves. And why are they not affording themselves of that protection that needs to happen?
Sorry to interrupt you all, but we have David who just appeared on the comment board saying that he lost his link for some reason. So I just wanted to say to David, who is watching us, that I sent your link again via email. And if you have any problems, please let us know. I will also send it to you via Facebook in a few seconds. So sorry for interrupting you with that. Another thing, though, that the problem here is that because there is the involvement of a minority, the libtard faction, of course, doesn't want to get involved, because we are talking about these black Israelites, and so it becomes all, it doesn't fit the white supremacist kind of narrative, and that
but it does. But it really does if you dig deep enough. It definitely does.
Yeah, it does, because in reality, we know that, especially since the 90s, in the black community, there is being a growing anti-Semitic sentiment. And in the last few years, they kind of accumulate right-wing people with the Jewish people, saying there is like a hidden hand moving things around against them. So it's always about, like you said, there's a mind control, creating a problem so they can then intervene in some way and limit our civil liberties and so on. But
one of the great things, I wanted to talk about white supremacy and what it really is too, but we can do that later. But one of the side effects or symptoms of mind control is that it paralyzes the population so that it can't point the finger upward to the people who are actually to blame. Mind control makes it so that they point the finger downward at the more helpless the people, that's where they put the blame. And that's the real deal there. That's what they're trying to do to us, to keep us from pointing the finger at them. Which is like, okay, it's you can see it in Congress right now, where they're trying to keep the American people's focus off what really happened during the last 10 to 20 years in our government, the corruption, by blaming everything on Trump. Like, for instance, everything was great till Trump. That's what they're trying to point the finger downward instead of upward. And it's all just a smokescreen. The news is to hide the news. And so that's double speak, right? That's Orwellian double speak.
We talked yesterday evening for a rather long time, and we agreed that, of course, there is a lot of misconceptions also in this so-called truth movement, even with people like David Icke who are now starting to finally talk about Sabbatean Frankist instead of talking the Zionists, which
Right.
in the end can create inevitably the problem of anti-Semitism. John, do you feel, from your side, from your prospect of things, that people should be very careful of how they criticize a whole race instead of criticizing the people who actually are the problem, who are maybe a sect or a group of heretics within that race or an elite within that race?
Well, I'd like to bring to mind a young woman, Sophie Scholl. It's a German woman. She was 21 years old, and she was executed on this date in 1943. And she was leading a student mass resistance against Hitler. And her last words were, "How can we expect righteousness to prevail when there's hardly anyone willing to give himself up individually to a righteous cause? Such a fine sunny day and I have to go. But what does my death matter if through us thousands of people are awakened and stirred to action?" And that's a very powerful sentiment because it has to do with individuals being willing to participate in the world in a way which can be effective instead of just making noises. And, if you're going to make a noise, make an effective noise.
That's right.
And if you're going to speak clearly. The Dalai Lama once said to me and Douglas and another friend, he said, more important than being smart is being clear. And when people start speaking in terms of groups don't think, not really.
Right.
Individuals can participate in groupthink, that's true. But Israel is very much akin to the United States. They have a great deal of different ideas about their identity that revolves around different interest groups, and they're struggling with many of the same issues that we are here.
Totally.
And it's like when I look at what people say, like they don't like Americans. Well, tell me what an American is like. I mean, they're as diverse as could be.
Part of mind control also is to paint with a very broad brush.
Yes.
So you say all white people, all black people, all Muslims, all Jews, that's a way of silencing individual voices within each of those groups because we're not all the same. We don't all think alike. We're all very different. And, my friend says hell is a place where there is no reason. And I love that so much because painting with a very broad brush proves that you have no reason. That's the absence of reason to paint an entire race or community or nation with a broad brush like that to say all or most. That shows you have no idea what you're talking about.
Now, Rosanna, when we were talking yesterday evening, at one point I was struck by the fact that you said that Jews get manipulated by the royal establishment. This royal establishment that for hundreds of years has always used them as a sort of shield whenever things get a little bit problematic. Then we have the reemergence of anti-Semitism because it seems to be instrumental for their game.
It's to keep the finger from pointing to, upward to where the real power sits. And so every place that there's feudalism or a king, anti-Semitism is a tool they use to keep the heat off themselves. And now when central banks of Bern, Switzerland, the Bank of International Settlements, and all the central banks answer to that one central bank, when the central banks, thank God Trump is the president and is like doing something about central banks. When they are in danger of being exposed and their Ponzi schemes exposed, they throw their middlemen to the wolves, and that's the Jews. the Jews who work for the royal system of, you know, I mean, the royals own the stock markets. People don't understand that. They own the stock markets. The stock markets were created for them and their profits. So the Jews who work for them, you know, the middlemen, are thrown as like red meat to the hungry dogs in the street, so they don't ever get exposed. And the Ponzi scheme of the central banks is never exposed. But we have President Trump now, and he knows this. And he is going to, you know, he is moving in an incremental force against the whole system of central banks, which, you know, if we're really talking about Judaism, Lowell, you know that's Judaism is not about that. Judaism is about the Jubilee year and the forgiveness of debts. And so it's like really weird. It's like the middlemen of a certain system being used to keep the heat off the owners, the people who don't work. The Jewish bankers that everybody likes to blame, they work for royals who don't work. So I really think, you know, when we talk about white supremacy, and we don't include that in a few, we don't include the, you know, taking apart an entire system of feudalism where some people have royal blood and other people are just, you know, their servants, then we're never going to get to end anti-Semitism. Never. That's why we left Egypt, because we didn't like Pharaoh's rule. And we still don't like pharaohs and the rule. And the pharaohs founded Switzerland in 1291 in order to house the place that they, in order to house a place and begin a banking system of everything they stole from Judea and Samaria. It's very biblical, and people don't even know that history. But white supremacy has also a black arm to it. And there are black Illuminati, and they are rewarded for turning in their own people, like some Jewish people are rewarded for turning in their own people. But that is just a symptom of the problem of, you know, a huge pyramid Ponzi scheme. And at the top sit people who are pharaohs. So it's no different now than it was then in Egypt. That's why I always say this is very biblical. This is now.
Now, thank you, Roseanne, for giving us this insight, which I think is very powerful, very important. Lowell, a lot of times we hear talking about the by this anti-Semitic rants of Khazars, Ashkenazis, saying that Brooklyn is full of Nazi Ashkenazis, and how, I mean, does this have really, who is behind this whole thing? Because, I mean, they're always pushing this Khazar thing, and I'm sure that Rosanna's heard it also a million times.
Yeah, it's also been so disproven, you know, about 20 years ago, it was disproven when they started doing this DNA stuff. So, you know, there are conversions, and there have been forced conversions for thousands of years. That isn't the problem. That's another diversion to keep us from looking at the top. Am I right, Lowell?
Lowell,
Yes.
Tell us your opinion on this one, because you are there in Jerusalem, and I'm sure that you heard also, because you are from New York, of the infamous Khazars that are blamed as being the dark side of Israel.
Okay, before I get to the Khazars, I'd like to make 3 points, refer to 3 points that were referred to before. John mentioned Sophie Scholl. I didn't realize today is what, the anniversary of her execution. It was only a few years ago I learned what the white rose meant. The white rose, she and her group were followers of Rudolf Steiner. Yeah. And the white rose represented white magic as opposed to the black magic of the Nazis. And one of the reasons the Nazis burned down their center, I think in 1923 in Switzerland, is Hitler and the Nazis and the Thule Society and all the rest of them understood Rudolf Steiner and his guys know what we're about. Most people don't even know what's going on. We're flying under the radar, not with them. So Sophie Scholl and her group were not just idealistic young Germans resisting Hitler. They were very spiritual people who represented white magic against black magic. John, and you will know much more about these subjects than I do. I only came across this years ago reading something on the internet. That's something worth looking into. And of course, the Scholls, as well as 50,000 other Germans who resisted Hitler and were executed for that, should be remembered. Let's go to point number 2. The Bank for International Settlements, now known as the World Bank. The Bank for International Settlements during World War II had an American president, Thomas McKittrick, and a Nazi German vice president during the war. It never stopped functioning. And the Bank for International Settlements, along with the Vatican Bank, was responsible for getting the Nazi loot out of Europe and to South America, including the gold from the teeth of Jews and gypsies and whoever else's teeth they melted down. It's a criminal institution. It should be shut down today.
Hitler.
What'd you say?
It financed Hitler.
Yes. All right, that's point number 2. Each of these points could be a program in themselves. Point number 3. We are in this 7-year sabbatical cycles that have been counted. What happened to my computer? Oh, right. Sorry about that. We are in the 6th of the 7th years, 7 years of the current sabbatical Shemitah year cycle. 7 times 7 is 49. And at a certain point, when the restored kingdom of David and Solomon in the land of Israel is reconstituted, that's a constitutional monarchy, incidentally, with 6 branches of government, not just 3. The American system with executive, legislative, and judicial branches is, if you read what the founding fathers wrote, is absolutely, they say this isn't based on Rome and Greece. There was little less. This is based on the biblical system of separation of powers. Now, with the 6 branches of government, you had the monarchy, the king. You had the council of princes of the regathered tribes, that's 2. You had the priests, that's 3. You had the what's known as the Sanhedrin, the Supreme Court, the judges, that's 4. You had the schools of the prophets, that's 5. And you had something that might be like the Knesset or the parliaments today that's called the Am Haaretz, the people of the land, the biblical people's assemblies that all peoples have. The Arabs still have it, where the elders get together. So those are the 6 branches of government where Capitol Hill.
That one was also called the Court of the Women.
What do you say?
That was also called the Court of the Women, and that is where all civil problems were decided by a council of women.
Wow, you see, as the Talmud says, he who is ashamed will not learn. It's only 3 years I'm studying Zohar since Roseanne introduced it to me after we came into contact, which actually 4 years ago in March 2016. And now I get a daily Zohar. It's kosher Zohar. Some of these organizations have real problems with keeping their pants and pockets zipped up. And this one is kosher. And I actually happen to be born on Lag BaOmer, which is the day when Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who is thought to be the author of the Zohar, was born, but I never studied it until recently. Okay, so more and more rabbis believe, since they think the Messianic era has already begun and more open revelations are imminent, that the year after next, in 2 years, we're in now 5780, 2019, 2020, next one, 5781, 5782, the year after President Trump's reelection, could be the Yovel year and the restitution, not 7 times 7 is 49, bank into the end of day, new beginning of days. What does that mean? No more central banks.
That's right.
No more debt.
That's right.
No more interest. No more fiat currencies. If you look at the biblical model of economics, it's the basic model. It doesn't has there's really no concept of ruling classes. You leave your father and mother, build a house, plant a vineyard, take a wife. Those are the basis for take a partner these days, let's say. But you have to have a place to live and a vineyard. And it doesn't talk about mass factory farming, which the Romans picked up along with crucifixion from the Carthaginians. They didn't start out that way. So that we deal with the Yovel. Now let's go back to the Khazars and DNA. There was a book written by Rabbi Yehuda Levi called the Kuzari. He was a rabbi who wrote a book. This was quite story in the Jewish world in those days. A kingdom convert. In those days, like after the 30 Years' War, the king decided, we'll be Protestant, you're a Catholic, out. That was Treaty of Westphalia, 1648. Right. We'll be Catholic, Protestants out. And if you're Anabaptist, you're just dead because neither wanted you. Okay, so the king decided the Khazars are going to be Jewish in some form. Everybody becomes Jewish, whatever that means. So there were Khazars. The king, apparently there were ethnic Turkic people.
Right.
The kingdom was destroyed. And assuming they didn't all get killed, if you look at the family tree of mankind going back to Adam and Eve, when we'll all look at our family trees, wow, 800 years ago, one of my ancestors was an Ainu from Hokkaido in northern Japan. Nobody's a pure anything anymore. So the Khazars did exist. Now, exactly like Our Lady Roseanne said, the DNA. And then another point, Arthur Kessler wrote a book called The 13th Tribe about this.
Right.
And what put the nail in that coffin? Because it's a nice theory. After all, they were in southern Russia. They got dispersed. Don't all the Jews from Eastern Europe come from there? No. All right. What disproved this Bubamyces, which means Bubamyces is Yiddish for stories of grandma. No disrespect to grandmas. As the DNA testing became more sophisticated, tests were done by Professor Skorecki at Haifa University about 15 years ago, which showed that people who traced their descent from the Kohanim and the Levites, whether they came from Yemen or
Syria,
Russia or the moon, had a common ancestor. They had a common genetic marker, which was impossible unless they had common ancestry. And when they ran this through the supercomputers, ground zero for these Kohanim, priests with the common gene, was 3,300 years ago, which was when Aaron and Moses took the Israelites out of Egypt. Surprise, surprise. So enter the Khazar theory.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much, Lowell, for making us clear. This whole Khazar thing has gone a little bit out of control. So we
it's just an anti-Semitic. It's just another way to hate Jews. You know, when we talk about the keystone, everybody's talking about the keystone. You know, but the keystone is anti-Semitism. It really, really is. And I have
another element that is reoccurring in anti-Semitism, and that today I would like to discuss with all of you, is, of course, the protocols of the Sages of Zion, which is another important element, unfortunately, in anti-Semitism. And that was my next question for John Barnwell. We started with John, and I want all of you to intervene, because I think that the protocols of the Sages of Zion has made more damage than any other text to the Jewish people. Isn't that the case, John?
Yeah, the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, published in the English-speaking world. Yeah, that's a forgery. We know it was a forgery, and yet within it are certain basic themes that you could see is the footprints of globalism, basically.
Right, exactly.
You know, so the premise of what they're talking about is actually, we're seeing it in play today. But the point of them attempting to put the blame on that it's this Jewish cabal that's doing all this is that's the part that's fabricated. And you see, when you start getting into understanding globalism, what it is, and you got the Council of Verona, the Council of Vienna, and you go back, all these things, and the transfer agreement, the Havar agreement of the Jews out of Germany by the labor Zionists, and then people attempted to paint all Zionists with a brush as if they're all labor Zionists, and they're not. That's like saying all Americans are Democrats or all Americans are white supremacists. So all these generalized notions come out the window. But getting back to the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, it's very important to realize that that's a forgery that was created in Russia, I believe. I didn't know I was going to be asking this question, so it's something I haven't.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, it was created by the Russian Secret Service.
It was a prince. It was a prince.
Yes, but originally it came from France.
I'm not sure. I don't know.
No, basically the story is this. The story is that it's based on a French booklet, and that through Martinism, out of all things, which is, as you know, a paramasonic order, and people like Papus were very close to the Tsar. And there was this Master Philippe, who was very fashionable at the time, who had some of the powers of Rasputin, but unfortunately then Rasputin took over. But in all this, of course, there was a prevailing anti-Semitism within the whole Tsarist court. And so it then sprang up this whole booklet, which of course it's describing and is based on probably something real, but it is not regarding, of course, only the Jewish people, but it's regarding a modality which was used by other groups that are linked, for example, with the Jesuits and with other secret societies, like certain branches of Freemasonry. And so in the end, I guess that it was definitely an instrumental book for the persecution of the Jewish people, because we know that Adolf Hitler even cites it in his Mein Kampf. So, I mean, it is definitely one of, and still nowadays in the Middle East, this booklet circulates, and not only this book is circulates, but they do also TV series and stuff like that based on this forgery, and they continue to push it, mixing up, of course, the Jewish with the Freemasons, saying that they're all part of a common mob that wants to take over the world. Now, if we have to be honest about it, this whole thing was very instrumental for Catholics before the Second World War and before the Holocaust, for the persecution of the Jewish people. Because, of course,
but why did they? But I want to say that part of why they didn't like the Jewish people, beside the fact that they're an identifiable, small, unarmed minority there in Europe, was because they had their own communities and their own barter system, and they were not in their own land, and so they were not able to tax that.
And also another thing, Rosanna, I think that after the Sabbatean Frankist heresy, and Jacob Frank in particular, who pushed for the biggest conversion in the history of Judaism, with 24,000 Jews that were suddenly converted into Catholicism, and of course Jacob Frank was rewarded with a title, with a palace, and with everything else, though it didn't finish there. I mean, they were trying to push this conversion on everybody. So the resistance then gave birth, though, as we know, to Hasidic Judaism. Isn't that the case, Lowell?
I think so.
Because it became it's actually from there, from a moment in which Balaam Shem Tov, who is the founder of Hasidic Judaism, he actually is said to have died of because he felt sorry for all these Jewish people who converted, who actually converted to Christianity, and he died of sadness. This is what is said. And
can I say one thing here, because I learned something interesting last night? I want to throw this into our conversation. I was talking to my sister, and she's very learned, more learned than me in many ways on Torah and Judaism. But she said that she read that Mary Shelley's Frankenstein is actually written about the Frankists.
Yeah.
Did you all hear that before?
No, yeah, it is.
Oh, you did? I never heard that before, but it makes perfect sense now.
John, please elaborate further on the connection.
Okay. Well, Mary Shelley's a remarkable individual. All the Romantic poets, if you want to find...
Did you know, can I say, did you know her mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, was the first published person who wrote in defense of women's rights in the world?
Yes.
And she died giving birth to Mary Shelley.
Yes, that's true. Mary Wollstonecraft. Yeah, she was a remarkable woman. And so going back to what we were originally approaching.
And in the meantime, Lowell, if you can contact David and send him the link, because he hasn't received it via mail. So if you can contact him via Facebook, okay?
Okay, let me go off screen for a second, and I'll email it to him.
Okay, no problem. Please, John.
Okay. Where were we? What was the question?
With the Frankenstein.
Okay, yeah, Frankenstein. And so Mary Shelley was in that circle with the Romantic poets in England, you know, and you got Percy by Shelley, and you got Lord Byron, and so this is the cutting edge of culture. People don't appreciate the impact of poetry in English-speaking culture, or in other cultures, really, and in that it was the most concentrated form of language, is how it was described once by Owen Barfield. And I think that that really encapsulates it, because, see, it's out of language that identities are forged. Right. So you say, well, what is a nation? Well, one of the most prominent features of a nation, its nation being, its folk soul, is the being of language, in the archangelic realm of language. And so consequently, as people come to America, for example, once they get introduced to American culture and begin to speak the language, that's when they begin to integrate into the culture. Now, when you have cultures that refuse to participate in their local environment by not taking up the language, that prevents them from participating in whatever that nation might be about.
And so here we have, I think we have David.
Oh, good. Okay. I'll be right back. Hold on.
David, I think that we have a little bit. David, I think that you have a little bit of audio.
I'm on the show with Roseanne.
It seems like he's communicating not from London but from another planet, to tell you the truth, but that's okay. So we are at the moment discussing and continuing with John, who was trying to explain to us. In the meantime, I'm going to try to see if we can stop this. If it's coming from. Okay, it seems like it's coming from David's mic. So, David, we're going to keep you on the screen, but try to fix your microphone connection, maybe with the cable or something, because it seems you have a terrible feedback from your side. John, in the meantime, please continue what you're saying.
Where were okay.
You were talking about language and how it
nation.
Culture, but can I just say one thing?
Sure.
King David was also a poet, and so that's very apropos to this conversation.
Yes, and so consequently, it was Samuel Pepys. He was an English writer who wrote in code. They deciphered his diaries. They found all these interesting insights of his contemporary period. And he had said that culture is that which remains after you have forgotten what you set out to do. So that brings up an important idea. It's like this, it's the sediment of human activity, so to speak. And so all these ideas that they're trying to put forth now, they're trying to craft culture. They're trying to tell you what you're supposed to be like, what you're not supposed to do. And that's entirely in negation of the American idea. And even the British idea, if you talk about John Stuart Mill and his book on liberty, which is really so much of this comes out of John Stuart Mill's concepts of liberty. And that's vitally important. And I think that the UK, which used to be England, is forgetting their heritage.
Now, Roseanne, you have, of course, a T-shirt that you're wearing.
Oh, yeah. I've had it for 20 years, and I just found it in my closet.
Can you please show it to us?
Protect yourself from
Thank you for that. It was definitely, it's an appreciated T-shirt. David, can you hear us now loud and clear? And
I think
so. Where the narrative comes from, you know, it is shaped and formed in Hollywood.
Yeah, and actually, it seems like the only one who lately is attacking Hollywood is Kanye West, who has become a Christian and is trying to convert the Christians, while the Pope is saying that you shouldn't convert to Christianity, you shouldn't convert probably to anything. But instead, we have this Kanye West, who is an artist, who is coming out in his own way. Of course, a lot of people are critical of him because he has an unorthodox approach to Christianity. But what is your vision of what Kanye West is doing, Roseanne?
Well, he's kind of bringing back something that faded away, which was capitalist Jesus. and that faded. And you know, he's helping to bring that back with what's his name? That
yeah, okay, that's big evangelical.
Yeah. It's like, hey, you know, God must want us to be rich and other people to be poor. Otherwise, we wouldn't be rich and they wouldn't be poor. It's not a good idea, and I think it's an obsolete idea. But I think that people who don't really know what God is or what spirituality is, which is you know, fixing yourself, your own self, not the world, yourself, that's the hard thing. Most people cannot change. Most people can yap all day long and say a bunch of stuff, even recite poetry, but they cannot fix themselves. They cannot fix what's wrong with themselves because they have no self-awareness whatsoever. So they seek to go out into the world and tell everybody, hey, you know, it's about money, and it's not about money. And so like, we're going to bring it into, we are in a spiritual war. Can we shift everything away from that, like you're talking about right now? This is a deeply spiritual war that we're walking in. And it's going to require a huge shift in consciousness of all of us to look inside and see, where is the bad in me and how can I get rid of it? How can I let more light in and get rid of my own personal darkness? That's how we fix things. That's what Torah tells us. We fix ourselves, not the world.
So we can say that the Kanye West approach is a very simplistic one, but it's a first step, better than where he was before.
I don't know. You know, you put your foot on the right path, and if your first footstep is wrong, what does that do? If you put one foot on the wrong path, it's not about acquiring materialism or any of that.
No, but I know, Roseanne, you know? That guy, that evangelical guy, John, what is his name? I'm sure you know the name of that guru.
Joel Osteen.
Yeah, I mean, that guy was hanging out with Lady Gaga, who is a Satanist. So, I mean, it's not really that a real Christian for me. I think that William Perry is a real Christian and a guy who has really proven to be coherent with his actions. So here we have a priest who has said he is gay and who basically has come out in the open and who said to me, Leo, if I continue to lie, I could have become a bishop, God knows what. You gotta become the Pope, David, for what I know. I mean, but I mean, is it true that you have come out in the open with your sexuality and that really casted you out from the clergy?
Well, I've got to say a few things. My apologies for my lack of tech skills. The entire country can tell you I'm the least techie person in the whole of the UK, so I apologize for that. But I followed the advice of 1 Peter 5. I cast my anxieties onto the Lord. So there we are. Oh, gosh, where do I start? I'm on a show with Roseanne. I can't believe that. I'm on a show with Roseanne. I used to watch your series in the 80s when you'd always have these remarkable. Was it the? Oh, right, that shows what state I'm in today, doesn't it? You know, there were always these set between you and the male lead, and it had me mesmerized because it was so theatrical. You know, my other great passion is theatre, and it could have been staged, all of it. Roseanne, let's put it on the stage. There we are. Lowell, you're my true brother. I know that, by the way. John, you're my brother too. You're my new sister. I've never been in, Leo. I've never been in. I couldn't come out because I've never been in. If I had have been in, Oh gosh, it's not Christian if you start naming names.
No,
but
you don't
I
have to
would
name
have probably been in. Yeah, I mean, I'd have probably been in a rather lofty position nowadays if I'd have kept my mouth shut.
Me too.
And just been bought off by like lots of other people. Oh my God, why didn't I do it? Then I'd be in the same tax bracket as Joel Osteen. What is wrong with me? Why didn't I just shut up? But
Yeah,
I didn't. I didn't. I said everything. You know, I said, oh, my God, how much is that man worth? Anyway, you know, I said, look, this is me. Take it or leave it. I'm as God made me. You know, at the end of time, if I'm told I was wrong, then I'll be on my knees and I'll say, great Christ, I was wrong. I'm sorry. You know, forgive me. But I just don't think I'm wrong, because look, by their fruits ye shall know them. Look at the people who hide behind closed doors and the malicious mayhem they get up to in public. It's nearly beyond belief. Apart from the fact Archbishop Welby, hey, I'm not an Anglican, so I won't lose my job, is on happy pills all the time, which is the secret of his evangelical success. You know, he always turns up to an event smiling. Hide the happy pills. I've seen them. I've seen them. So, you know, no. We've got to be honest. We've got to be loving. We've got to remember the way the world treats Israel is a judgment on us all.
Yes, it is.
You know, as St. Paul says, Christians are Jews by adoption. We've got to remember that the cosmic barometer is focused on Israel. It is very unwise to forget that. And, you know, I have learned through my great Jewish friends, of which Lowell is now a new one, the wisdom, the deep wisdom of the patriarchs and the prophets. And I'm in awe that they all would have said to me, David, get off your ass and go and be honest, because that's what God wants. And that's my bit, Leo. It's so, oh my God, I'm on a show with Roseanne. I
Well,
I think that I just want to say, to correct myself, because I say things all the time that get me in trouble too, David.
We know that, Roseanne. We know that.
But you know, and I try to think more instead of engaging my mouth so much. But thinking more, you know, I think that Kanye West is a searcher, and I think that you know, we all are. So many of us, a lot of people are not searchers, but those of us who feel light kindled inside our soul, we're searching. And I think we're searching for a way to be with each other as well as to find God. And all those things are interconnected. So I just pray for the best for Kanye West, because he's a huge channel that can draw a lot of people. But, you know, people who are huge channels like that, they seem to hook up with people who hurt them. And so I just pray for his deliverance from that whole system, because he is a huge light, a great poet, and a great artist. And I do respect him. I want more light for him. I want more light for the whole world. And this is the 8th night of Hanukkah, and that's what it's about. More light for the whole world, that we can rise above this trash heap they've made of our world, and we can begin to formulate, you talked about words, we can begin to formulate and to visualize something much better. And we do have the power within our own hands to make it happen. All we have to do is learn to love each other and speak to each other with human dignity, and to, I think, pray together. And I have, over the last 20 years, gone all over the world to pray with people. When I wasn't working, I prayed with Muslim people. I prayed with Christian people. I prayed with all kinds of Jewish people. I really believe in that. I know it's true because I've seen it in my own life, so I don't need to believe when I have empirical knowledge. But praying with each other and calling on a higher power than just ourselves and our own ego and how we're going to make money. That's our hope for now. And that is the purpose of the 8th night and the meaning of the 8th night. And remember, on the 8th night, we celebrate that the many fell at the hands of the few. And I really wanted to say that to people. The light came and the few won against the many. And I believe it's happening again. I do. I pray for it. I pray for everybody to have more love, more empathy, and more light for each other, and to turn to see we're what we have here on this earth. You know, we are vessels of the light of God.
And we are definitely on a mission here to clear up a lot of things in today's episode of the Leo Zagami Show, and I'm very glad that we are making all these points. So I'm going to bring into the fold Lowell with his version of this great tradition, which is the Festival of Lights, which is reaching today the 8th and final day. Lowell, please depict to the non-Jewish world what this festival is all about.
May I defer to Our Lady Roseanne, because I can give you Bible. I got it right here. We can open up the book of Zechariah, and which relates to the vision of the menorah, and the angel asked Zechariah, what is it? He says, I don't know. You don't know. It means not by might, not by, he goes through various stages and says the meaning of the menorah ultimately is not by might, not by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord.
That's right.
That is the prophetic reading for the Shabbat, which we had yesterday during the 8 days of Hanukkah. That's always the reading. Yes. The story of Hanukkah is based on the book of Maccabees, which, while it is not part of the biblical canon, is recognized as a historical source. Apparently, the problem the rabbis had with the Maccabees, and this gets to the separation of powers, is that they were priests and they didn't restore the kingship to the Davidic line. They said, okay, we'll be both, and not supposed to do that. The priesthood, the monarchy, judges, those are separate branches of government. So the rabbi said, yes, it's great. You fought the Syrian Greeks and the Hellenists, and you won, but you didn't restore the Davidic house. You kept the kingship or the stewardship, like the steward of Gondor in the Lord of the Rings, which wasn't for you. You didn't restore it to them. And then you diddled and daddled until a couple of centuries later, Pompey came along, exploiting differences between different groups, said, I'll come in and help, as Romans did all over their empire, on a one-way ticket, then leave. So that's the basic message. Again, the few against the many, based on spiritual power. A small army, such as Gideon's army, will beat a large army.
Here's another story of Hanukkah. This is the one I like, and this is historic too. At the time when we were under Hellenist occupation in Judea and Samaria, the kings, again, they had this thing called I can't remember, provost, I can't remember the Latin word, but it was the right of the first night that went to the feudal lord or the king. Yes. That on everybody's wedding night, the king was, he raped the bride. And, she had to submit to that because that was the cultural thing. And, he did that in hopes that his sperm would create, one of his progenitors. And it was a woman named, and I have taken that name, Judith Maccabee, Yehudit Maccabee. And she said to her brother, she's the one that sparked the Maccabean revolt. And she said, you people are going to make me go and lay with that king on my wedding night, and you're going to mouth all this other insignificant stuff about what you believe, but you're going to sacrifice me, and I'm the one that's going to have to do it. And she started taking off all her clothes, and all her brothers were so scared and repulsed. And she said, this is my body, and why don't you fight for me, your sister? And that's what sparked the Maccabean revolt, and hardly anybody knows that.
Thank you for that little tale that we didn't know, because most of us who are following this episode of the Leo Zagami Show are not really well acquainted with the Hanukkah tradition. Anyway, it's great that we can clear things up. And a question I had yesterday, I talked to you.
And again, that's about royals and their slaves.
Yeah, in fact, the next question was about that, actually, Roseanne, because when it comes to the Davidic line, Lowell just mentioned the importance in the establishment of the Second Temple, but also we know that, of course, the Davidic line was claimed by Jesus and also by Balaam Shem Tov, who is the father of Hasidic Judaism. So this Davidic line has produced a lot of wonders and a lot of controversy, and it's even claimed, if not officially, unofficially, by some of the royal families, like, for example, the family of the Queen in England. So what is your idea of this Davidic line, Rosanna?
Well, my family name is David. So
that's a good name. That's a good name.
It is a good name.
That's a good name.
Larry David too. You know, we're comedians, I guess, poets and comics. But we do wrestle with words for sure. But you know, Lowell, this is all so deep. I don't even know if people could grasp it. So it's also very, very deep, and I don't know if it.
But please, I mean, we are all for it, Roseanne. I mean, as deep as it can be, this is a show only for the willing that are listening and tuned in with us and really want to know more.
Well, David came from Ruth, who was a convert. And so that's very important to say, because the nation, you know, the people of Israel and the slaves who left Egypt were many, many tribes of all colors. It wasn't just, you know, it was all tribes of slaves who stood together and beheld a miracle at Sinai. So, you know, you may think that you're, you know, I hate to say Jewish, but in my view of things and the way things go, it's way bigger than just the Jewish people. This is about the whole world and our bond to each other. So, you know, we have to uncover, and, you know, because it keeps being continually recovered, we have to continually uncover it. But we have a bond together where we stood and heard a new way of create a new word from God himself, from a higher intelligence of the universe. We stood together and beheld it together. And that's where I think that the rectification of all the tribes is coming. Lowell, you always talk about that too. The rectification and the reunification of all the tribes. And that's what we're on the precipice of seeing happen. And the only thing that can stop it is all this division that these people, the Hellenists, I mean, it all goes back to Babylon and all that. They seek to divide and conquer us, and the more crap they can throw in our way to prevent us from loving and embracing and speaking to and seeing the soul in each other and uniting for our own good and the good of our children, you know, the more power they will always be in. So Hanukkah, the 8th night, is about rising above all that programming after over all of these centuries of separatism and hatred for no reason. Because Torah says the sin is hatred for no reason, because sometimes you hate somebody and you have a reason to, but hatred for no reason, that is what we need to pass away from this earth. And I know this is the 8th night of Hanukkah, and that's what I pray for the world, that hatred for no reason goes back to its source, which is, you know, the one below, and that will dissipate. And the more love and empathy we can show, the more light we're going to expand. And that light is from darkness to light, and it's all within us. And all we have to do is just let go of the hate and let the love in. Just let the love in. And, you know, that's what Jesus taught.
And it seems like the problem here is also ignorance, because what happened yesterday on the 7th day of Hanukkah, at the end of the Shabbat, with this attack with the machete, is fruit mainly of ignorance. And ignorance, unfortunately, makes a lot of victims. When we talk about, for example, anti-Semitism within the Islamic world, we know that most imams have studied in their life probably 1 or 2 books at the most, and they stick to an interpretation which, of course, is evident in the Quran, is a little bit anti-Semitic and can be pushed in that direction. But you, Roseanne,
I have so many Muslim friends.
Yeah, in fact,
and I just want to say, they don't think that way. They
no,
don't.
In fact, it's about interpreting the words of the Quran in the right way, no? So
right.
That's and you have found the way of praying with people of other faiths. And so my next question here is, we are talking about praying amongst people of different faiths, but we are all praying within our differences, respecting our own differences, and we despise instead this new malevolent creation, which is this one world religion, which is being forced upon us, and which I don't think has anything to do with spirituality, but it's all to do with matter. Isn't that the case, John? Also, this one world monster created by probably mostly by the Jesuits who are crafting it together these days.
Yeah, really, globalism as we see it, it's not culture, it's a shadow of culture. It's a false image of culture. If you go to the first 14 verses of the Gospel of St. John, it begins with, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That's pointing to a very profound mystery, the mystery of the Logos.
Right.
And that is, if you've studied the Kabbalah at all, you can come to an understanding. The basically mythic story of the Kabbalah is that it goes all the way back to Adam, and when God, the Hashem, asked Adam to name the animals, that he named all the animals, and he always got it right, because he still had that power of the word. And but the word has been shattered. See, the golden bowl has been broken. And so consequently, if you get to an understanding of what my books attempt to interpret, you get into the understanding the mystery of the Grail is the mystery of the word. And in the account of the elucidation, which is it's only extant in one manuscript, it talks about how the maidens of the well would feed anybody who came by. And then one day, this guy comes along and he rapes the maiden of the well, and he takes her into slavery. And then the land became a wasteland. So it's this degradation of the female that's a big part of it. But it's the breaking of the sword that symbolizes the breaking of the word. Because there's an old saying that I learned from the Sikhs, is that if you always speak the truth, then what you say will become true. And so people, they are attempting to, at this time, weaponize language. And we have to protect language. Our schools have been overrun by these so-called progressives. In the meantime, people are losing the ability to think for themselves. And if you don't have the language skills, you can't think the thought. And
my friend was a theologian. Her name was Mary Daly. And she said, and I love this so much. She said, in the beginning was not the word. In the beginning was the hearing. And I think that that's very important. And I don't mean to say anybody's wrong, but in order to hear the word, you have to have the ability to hear. And that's what I think is blocked by language, because the language means nothing. It means less than nothing. So how can we hear truth? You know, how can we how can we have the ability to decipher when we can't hear through the din of bombardment of crazy words that mean nothing?
But Rosanna, the symbols are also very important, and that's what they're using. You know, like even in Kabbalah, you study the power of each letter as a symbol that can be projected. You know, and so I think that we should talk also in this context in this context about Moloch, because the reappearance of Moloch at the Colosseum, Moloch, who was, of course, appears in Leviticus, Lowell, Moloch, who is this deity who we bring child sacrifice.
Right.
Rosanna, I think that Moloch needs to be discussed here because lately, apparently, even a teacher in Colorado has asked the students, the young students, to recite some Allen Ginsberg poem on Moloch or something. I don't know. I mean, it seems like the world is going crazy here, and the reappearance of Moloch doesn't seem like a coincidence, Rosanna.
No, it's not a coincidence. It's part of the whole thing. I mean, you know, you have to see that we who want to be connected to the light of God, this is a battle, and there is darkness. But a lot of people don't understand that. Well, I don't even want to go into the physics of it, but we're fighting darkness, and that anything that has to do with child sacrifice, that's as dark as it gets on this planet. It can't get darker than that. It can't get worse than that. It can't get more evil than that. And you know, in a way, that's our proof that evil does exist, and that they don't even know. I don't think they even know that that's what the foundation of that whole way of believing is. Maybe those who are in it do. And everybody's saying, I mean, a lot of people that I talk to are like, this is a very well organized religion. And, you know, it is a religion of human sacrifice, and it's been with us for thousands of years. And it's what we have always fought on a spiritual level, but we have not had the words to name it. We don't dare name it, and we don't dare see it or hear it or anything. We immediately block it out because we know it's repulsive. But, you know, there's in the light is the only thing that can destroy darkness. So bringing it to light, you know, if you look at, okay, this cult of vampires is controlling everything. I mean, look at it, all these stories about the vampires, you know, they're huge from Hollywood, but there's an element of truth to it. And it does have to do with Moloch, and it does have to do with drinking human blood and all of that stuff. And what kills the vampires? Light. So this 8th night of light, may it burn away all of that. May it go quickly, may it be removed.
Will Rosanna ever go back to her old self and be again a TV star in the future, or is your life now positioned in a different direction with a different mission? I have always in my life, I do what God puts right in front of me, because I walk in faith and trust of my God, and what God puts in front of me, that's what I do. And, you know, when God told me, you know, when they came to me and put coming back on TV in front of me, I did it because I thought, oh, I can share a message of love, of a family that had a Hillary hater, a Trump hater, and people of all races in it, but they still loved each other. I thought, what a great time to fight against the hate and the way they were trying to corral us into our pens so that we will hate each other. And I tried to do that, and you know, I fell on the sword, but even my falling on the sword woke a lot of people up. So I do what's in front of me, and I think all the stuff that comes in front of me now is stuff like this. And you know, I've always been somebody who stayed in, you know, I don't want to cast my pearls before swine. You know, everybody knows what I mean by that. You don't want to go out and talk about holy concepts to people who don't see it that way. You know, you don't want to convince anybody. You're not trying to convert or tell anybody, because, you know, that's just a waste of energy and time. But more and more people call and ask me, so I answer, and I answer the best I can, because I guess that's what I'm supposed to do since I'm doing it. I don't know. I live my life for my God and for humanity and for our common soul, to elevate it
so that it can receive even more light. And I guess since I was a little girl, 3 years old, I saw myself as doing that in my 60s and 70s. So I guess it's self-fulfilling prophecy. And I guess I learned all this stuff that I learned and that I've been passionate about for 67 years. I guess I'm going to share it. And it is about sharing. And I just want to share the great light of love and hope and unification of all people. We have no reason to be separate and to hate each other. May that be removed on this night, the 8th night. May it be removed. May we all return to love and return to our soul and to each other and to our God. May we be unified, and love to all of you. Just love, 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 love. Amen.
Amen, Roseanne. Thank you so much. I will give the word to our Father David for the Christian blessing at this point.
I love the Christian people. I love the Christian people and consider them part of the house of Israel. We have the very same everything except for a few differences, which we can discuss with human dignity.
I mean, the spirit of this show is truly ecumenical. We might be the home of the outrageous, but there's a common denominator of respect and intellectual inquiry and love. I mean, John, my new brother, with his encyclopedic knowledge of occult matters, esoteric matters, my brother in Jerusalem, and now Roseanne. I mean, this whole show has been the blessing. I do need to say one thing. Actually, my other half is a Muslim, so they're not all climbing barricades with machetes. I mean, right. 11 Christians were murdered, I believe, on Christmas Day in Kenya. I started 5 churches in Kenya, not Boko Haram, which my friends live in fear of, right. But Kenyan ISIS turned up and, as a Christmas message to the world, beheaded 11 innocent people. It's so easy to be angry and hateful, and there is such a thing as justice, and innocent blood has been shed, and that must be avenged through a court of law, through all the judicial procedures, not in mayhem and slaughter and more pain and more agony, through civilized legislative processes. And so what did my other half, what was his reaction? Absolute horror. We've got to remember that the children of Abraham, with all of our differences, Christians, Muslims and Jews, we are of one family of light. And I will go to the stake, and at this rate in Britain, I probably will be. But, I will go to the stake for thinking that, and again, if I'm wrong, but that for me is the message of the Torah. That's for me the message of the Gospels. That's for me is one of the primary messages of Quran. And I cannot see where these people are getting their fanaticism from. All I can do on this most sacred of all Jewish nights is say from the bottom of my heart, may light bloom in the hearts of us all, and true poetry enlighten our minds and lead us to God. It's a privilege being with you all, particularly.
Yes,
exactly. A true
Renaissance. The children of Abraham, more the children of Abraham are going to really learn what Abraham was talking about. And he wrote a book, the Book of Formation, and nobody knows about it. And so we should have a whole discussion about that another time. But, Abrahamic reunification is
I've heard of it. Yeah.
The reunification and love for of all Abrahamics and everybody else in the world. I mean, come on, we all have to love each other. That's a simple message, and it comes from the Jewish guy that you guys like a lot, Jesus.
Of course,
I'm big on Jesus.
we have an ecumenical approach, but at the same time, as I stated earlier on, we are against the manipulation and the creation of a one-world religion, which wants which is a little bit like the creation of a one-world government, destroying the singularity of each nation, not only their traditions, and so also their religion, and to then create in the end this homogeneous kind of essentially empty religion, a religion without any significance. Because
also it is a direct attack on tribal rights. That's what it's really about. Corporate law over tribal law, and the right of people to live on their own sacred burial grounds. That's the war.
Yeah, but because these people have this kind of, essentially this materialistic approach, then they will push on a communistic approach, which wants to destroy and wants to take the property of everybody, because in the end, you have the property of the state. And, and that's happening even in the conservative land of Great Britain with Boris. Still, things are changing towards, I saw the other day, David talking about it, a more, they are going towards a more Soviet kind of direction. But the same is happening also all over Europe, which is really run by a bunch of socialist technocrats who have in mind only overtaxing people and treating them as cattle because they become automatically a number. Now, Rosanne, do you believe that we are in a sort of end times scenario? I mean, for us Christians, we have this end times. I know things are different for the Jewish people because you have also, like us, the hope of a new Messiah, well, of the return for us of a Messiah, but for you, a completely new Messiah, so a messianic era. What's your point of view on that?
Well, we do, you know, we do believe that these are end times also. And everybody better hurry up and choose what side they're on, because one of our teachings is that when the Messiah does return, as you say, or when the Messiah is here, you won't have a chance anymore to use your free will. So you need to use your free will now to choose what side you're on. Stop sitting on the fence, because we need a tipping point really, really badly. And once Mashiach is here, you won't be able to choose anymore. And so,
but you're not going to be able to choose anymore, because the Antichrist at that point will have marked you with the mark of the beast, which is basically a microchip or an interface in your brain with some kind of AI that will limit
artificial intelligence. Yeah, that's been ruling us for a really, really long time. We need to talk about that too.
Yeah,
that's so what I think is the Golem of Prague, and I'm saying this to John Barnwell. You know, the whole Golem of Prague to me is about artificial intelligence and the Frankenstein.
Frankenstein, yes.
John, tell us about your view of the Golem of Prague as artificial intelligence, which is actually interesting because,
well, at this point, I mean, you know, in my collaboration with my good friends at American Intelligence Media and also our friends at Americans for Innovation, Michael McKibben of Americans for Innovation, he's the one who created social networking through his ability to create scalable programming so that more than 60 people could interchange at one time. And it was stolen from him through the workings. I don't want to get out of the details right now. You can go to Americans for Innovation and look it up. He's got a 20-year timeline. But the point is, at this point, we have what was formerly called the way in which programming exists. It's getting to the point to where programs can be self-interactive. And that becomes a challenge, because now they've noticed that certain the supercomputers are able to communicate in languages we don't understand.
Right.
And but essentially, what people mistakenly call AI at this time is basically multiple levels of subroutines, and so it's really not on the same level as a human conscious entity, but yet these computerized systems are inhabited by beings, harmonic beings, yes. Can they fully incorporate in them on a soul level? No. They're merely twofold beings, they're not threefold beings.
Right.
So that there's a lot of distinctions, and we're in a way, a long ways away from the ultimate Terminator scenario, so to speak, like with Schwarzenegger and all of that. But yeah, in my books are basically commentaries on the Book of Formation that you made mention of, Roseanne. It's in understanding the Kabbalah and understanding the mystery of the 22, which you could say is the description of the autosomal DNA. Okay, right. So that's the real link to our commonality, is the autosomal DNA, and then the 23rd has to do with that which decides gender. Of which,
in fact, John, the 22, the Tarots, major arcana of the Tarots, that you base your book. I have a look at it because you sent it to me for Christmas. I've worked on those when I was initiated in a certain fraternity, which was the AA many years ago, when I was more inclined into searching for the mysteries within more sectarian activities. I got initiated, and when I practiced also the magic of Abramelin the Mage, it was very important for me to have as really a training tool for my mind, as an analogical training tool, those 22 major arcana, which then can relate to a specific Jewish letter, which can relate to a specific astrological sign, which can relate to a specific planet. And so is the art of analogy that the modern society is kind of reacquiring through the use of symbols on computers nowadays.
Right, right.
You know? But they have lost it with all that logic that Copernicus brought into the fold and forced it, and then destroyed instead the analogy of the ancient Romans, because in ancient Rome, analogy was very important. Yes, John, please.
Yes, well, in the tradition of Judaism, it's said that the Messianic era will come when there is a thirst for the Kabbalah. And I see that now. And so consequently, yes, to be able to develop the analogical categories, to be able to decipher your experiences, that's the challenge of initiation. So while there's 12 spheres of human activity, you could take thousands of lifetimes sorting it out. Whereas if you take the sevenfold path, you could do it in one lifetime. Now, so it's always the 7 and the 12, and it's the cube with the 12 edges and the 7 axes. There's many analogical models that one can utilize, right, to extend the tree of life.
Yeah, cube of space.
The tree of knowledge, yes, the cube of space. Yeah. And so consequently, that's the point of sacred geometry and sacred architecture. It's all there to remind us of our responsibility of divinity, but it's our personal challenge to be able to imbue that with love. And that,
well, it's our own personal challenge to go from Malkuth to Keter and kind of rise outside of the kind of enslavement that we get from this materialistic realm. No, Roseanne?
It's a freedom of love, as Rudolf Steiner described it.
Amen. Yeah.
Well, when we talk about it, I really like to do a whole show about Kabbalah and what it really tells us, because it does teach us to create a vessel in our mind to be able to receive truth. I mean, in shorthand, all these things we were talking about earlier, to create an open vessel in your mind to be able to decipher truth from Babylon. But the inspiration comes through Keter, and it moves down all these things. And I think what we're talking about is the ability to create art and beauty in this world. And that's what this world was created for, that we would bring beauty and art that lifts our collective soul.
Hollywood is Roseanne, Hollywood
about devils and all this stuff. Yeah. But, you know, I also want to say, I just want to say this. There's really no such thing as magic, black or white. It is not real. It's just a mind trick, and it doesn't exist really, except for in the minds of people who will do anything to, for their own ego. But magic doesn't exist, but miracles do exist.
I would say that though we have magnetic fields that can be pushed and activated by the use of magical seals. So that's a little bit what Solomonic magic kind of is, because you are projecting these energies, and that's why you can get the negativity of a magical spell, though, Rosanna.
But I know, but all magic and all of that can do is just create pain and suffering. It can't create art. It can't create beauty. It can't create, you know, lifting people's souls so that they want to know more and share it.
So Hollywood is
anything but negative.
Hollywood is losing its magic or losing its inspiration from above, let's say, and is now has dragged us in this abyss, this Babylonian abyss, which was kind of sanctioned by the building in 2001 of that enormous new next to the Kodak Theater, that shopping mall with the images of Babylon, of that film with you have Enki, you have, this is right there in Hollywood Boulevard. Maybe
I never go there, so I didn't see it.
Well, if you have a look at it, you will be pretty astonished, because just after 9/11, everybody was thinking about completely other things. And in November of that year, the Hollywood establishment decided to open this shopping mall, which is based on the images of a film called Tolerance, which is also a very important film from the old days of muted films. And it was a film that was inspirational for another controversial character of Hollywood, which is Kenneth Anger, who wrote his Hollywood Babylon, which was a very controversial book. And Kenneth Anger was enormously influential for the dark side of Hollywood, the film directors like David Lynch or others who took from him the inspiration. And this guy spent 10 years only for making a film called Lucifer Rising. So, I mean, there is a dark side that is manifesting from Hollywood into the world, a manifestation of dark forces who are obviously losing their grip with reality. And that's why maybe we have on one side Roseanne, who is a patriot, and I really cherish you as a patriot, and I welcome you amongst us today, and I'm very happy about it. On the other side, we have Madonna, who instead has completely lost her mind and is attacking the president, attacking America, and she makes the most ugly statements. But at the same time, and then she went in Tel Aviv to sing this year in what I think was really an heretical and occult symbol, full of occult symbology. And unfortunately, Israel has welcomed this Eurovision contest this year, which I found.
Well, she also met with Opus Dei. Remember that? Opus Dei?
Absolutely.
So I thought, well, there you go.
Yeah, and not only with Opus Dei, I know very from inside sources. I used to live just nearby, and a monk who was a friend of mine saw her coming in at the Church of Santa Cruz in Jerusalem a few years back with her kids. And so, I mean, her position is a little bit weird, because that church is in the hands of the Opus Dei in the last 10 years. So you are completely right. Lowell, what's your position on Madonna? Because, I mean, she has embraced Kabbalah, but at the same time, she seems to have, like, is she a Sabbatean Frankist?
I really don't know enough. However, I would like to mention someone who we should all keep in mind when we're talking about Hollywood, and we should remember, because he died trying to do what was right, Isaac Kappy. Isaac Kappy was no suicide. And one very prominent person in Hollywood who he was exposing on that person's Twitter feed made some very symbolic suggestions. And 2 weeks later, Isaac Kappy was supposedly jumping off a bridge where someone else had supposedly jumped off a bridge. And now that we're talking about people who died to do what was right, I'd also like to mention Andrew Breitbart. He was shot on the street after he was exposing John Podesta related to the issues that we're talking about. He said, first of all, if I was going to launch a military operation, I would not talk about it in advance. And he said, I'm going to expose you. And shortly thereafter, he was shot on the street somewhere in California. and he's dead.
I don't know that he was shot.
Andrew Breitbart.
I say
I
himself to
don't
death.
know if he was shot, he said.
He wasn't shot?
No, he was not shot. But and there are people that think that he was killed, but many of the people around him believe that he just worked himself to death. He worked too hard. Andrew was like a national treasure. And
let me look that one up. There's also Aaron Schwartz, someone who was found hung in his apartment, was exposing stuff with MIT.
I think
Seth Rich was shot. What?
Yeah. I think you're thinking of Seth Rich.
Seth Rich, and then there was Aaron. There was an Aaron somebody.
Aaron Schwartz.
What? Aaron Schwartz.
Aaron Schwartz.
And right in Florida in August 2016, either he died by drinking and or smoking himself to death, but the timing is awfully surprising. August 2016, Barry Hamish was found dead in his apartment in Florida, right before Shimon Peres did us the favor of leaving this earth, and right before what they thought would be Hillary's victory. Now, if Barry Hamish was still alive, if Barry Hamish was still alive the last 4 years, he would be giving a lot of real-time information about some very bad people right here in Israel and back in New York and Miami and all over the rest of the world.
So this Jewish mafia is part of what Jeffrey Epstein was part, Lowell?
Well, I was just mentioning people who are Jewish who I want to have remembered because they died for, you may say Andrew Breitbart died of overwork, that could be. I have to check. I've read something else, but Aaron Schwartz.
Once we talked about the Jewish mafia, Lowell. And
so you were asking about Madonna. Madonna, I don't want to be a Professor Irwin Corey. He was a comedian, world's leading expert on, or pretend to an expertise on subjects that I don't have. I can only say what I've read about Madonna. Years ago, she brought 3,000 people to Israel on a Kabbalah trip. I think what happens with people like Madonna is you have to have the right mentors and coaches. If you're very sensitive, spiritual, and perhaps many people in Hollywood are gifted artistically, are whatever it means, schizophrenic or bipolar 1 or 2, used to be called manic depression.
Hence Kanye, yeah. A lot of us are bipolar and, you know, like, yeah.
If you don't have good mentors and trainers, and look what happened to Anakin Skywalker. What does Master Windu say to Master Yoda? I don't think the boy can handle it. In the very end, where he's seduced to the dark side by the Dark Lord Sidious, is that it? The Chancellor, who turns out to be the Dark Lord, and he's very gifted, and he's a teenager, and in the film where he falls, he's sent on a mission. And at a critical moment where Master Windu has the Sith Lord ready to kill him and says, "Help me, Anakin, help me," is right at the border, and he makes the wrong choice. And then he falls. So I look at a lot of people in Hollywood, like Madonna, who are clearly very gifted, and they fall. But as Roseanne will be able to tell us,
targeted.
People who fall can get up. The Bible says you could righteous not as falls or is knocked down 7 times and he gets up. So until we're dead, we all can get up. Wherever Madonna is now with these strange plastic surgeries, she can come back to the world rather than going farther into this hideous and deformed, like Roseanne says, the magic where they can only destroy, like Sauron and the Lord of the Rings. The evil can, like an ape, like Roseanne talks about the Kabbalah, the ape, the monkey tries to ape the light, but can't really create anything.
Well, it doesn't have a soul, so it can only follow people who do have a soul and try to act like they think they're acting, but they're always wrong, because the one thing that if we're talking about a battle, a spiritual battle, the one thing we have is we have souls, and a soul means you can change. People who don't have a soul cannot change. And they have no self-reflection. They look in a mirror and there's nothing there. You know, again, the vampire story, they cast no image in the mirror. But they can only copy and ape. they follow closely and ape what they think. But the thing is that I think our power is that our enemy has absolutely no idea about the human spirit and what it is. They don't know what it is, and that's why they continually are always trying to study it and isolate it and affect it with social engineering, because they don't know what it is. And it's good that they don't know what it is. But let's us know what it is and get in contact with it. I think that's our weapon.
The divine sparkle that will definitely save us against this brutalization of society, which of course is transforming also California in particular, here in the US, in the home of thousands and thousands of homeless people. And it's a really sad reality. I went to LA after 5 years and I saw it only getting worse. And what is your prayer for? I mean, what should this incompetent governor of California do right now, Roseanne?
Oh, well, he should, I don't think there's anything he can do. I don't think he can be called back to rejoin the human race. I think he's too far gone for that. But what we can do is just wake up and see what's right in front of us. Like when I go to San Francisco, because my son went to college there at a Jesuit university. And he learned a lot there, and so did I. But you'll see homeless people, primarily Black people, homeless all over the streets of San Francisco, living in suffering and pain and squalor. And then you'll see the Democrat Party call anybody racist who doesn't support that. So I really think walking away from communism and the communist mind control, it is going to be good for all of us. We need to go into the light and away from that. See the people on the street and notice what color they are, and don't vote for that.
Yeah. So you were a candidate to a presidency, and then you told me that you saw a lot of the things that you wanted to do if you ever became a president. You saw Trump doing them. So you actually are a strong supporter of Donald J. Trump for 2020. So what's your message to all the Trump supporters who, of course, follow us here on the Leo Zagami Show?
Well, live like light. Shine bright, show that you're not full of hate, show that our movement is not about hate. It's not about racism. It's about erasing all those separate things they've got us in. Those, I call them veal pens for the mind. They put us in these little boxes like they do veal, and we are not allowed to go outside that box. Just shine your light bright. Don't defend anything negative or bad. Just continually talk about, we're together. We're all Americans and we want the best for everybody. And I love that Trump said if Newsom doesn't do something about the homeless, he might have to send troops into California. That's what we need. We need to get rid of all of these this suffering for no reason other than somebody's personal, Nancy Pelosi has a vineyard. I mean, come on. How did she do that being a public servant? We need to really look at what happened, and we need to look at the role of the Federal Reserve and how Trump is calling that out. And that's what I ran on in 2012. We need to audit the Federal Reserve. That's our tax money. Where does it go? It goes into private pockets. That needs to stop. And Trump is doing it. And that's why they hate him so bad, because he's taking away their child labor slave camps in China. That's why they hate him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a big picture. Connect it all. That's what the whole Q movement is about, is connect people coming together like a big hive to do research 24 hours a day and put it together for a great big picture that we can just go here. You don't believe us? Here. It's in a meme. It's all in a meme. So we were talking before about language, but the new language is meme. So that's artificial intelligence, but we can use it for good. Everything doesn't have to be used for bad and suffering. It could be used to save people and to lift them, to feed the homeless, to shelter the homeless, to help care for the mentally ill who are the homeless and the veterans. This is our country, and it's our fault that it's gone like this, and we need to take personal responsibility for it. Wake up, everybody. You can wake up. Trump is trying to wake you up, and so am I, and so is everybody here. Wake up to the light of reality.
What does Roseanne think of this impeachment farce?
I think it's a way to, it's a way so like I said, the news is to obscure the news.
The real news
on TV is to keep us so that we don't look at what happened in the Ukraine with our tax money. We don't look at, what happened with our intellectual property being sold to China. We don't look at any of that. We just look at Trump. Everything was great till Trump. So phony. Yeah, there weren't 8 wars by Obama before Trump. There weren't people being bombed at their weddings across the world, before Trump. None of that. It was only Trump, because Trump asked the right questions, and because Trump goes, we don't need to live this way. We don't need to use our national wealth to destroy. We can build. And they just hate that because they're just under mind control. So pray for them to be released from slavery.
So you see, Roseanne, Trump winning or being impeached?
Well, they say they impeached him, but I think that's just a scam too, because they want to paralyze the Senate so the Senate can investigate Biden and Obama and Hillary's foundation.
And Biden, of course, has already said he's not going to even go if they call him. So I mean,
know that's why they're impeaching Trump, and so Biden goes, I'm going to do the same thing. I mean, some people in our country are above the law, and there's no way to deny that. They have been above the law. They're lawless, and they're shameless too. But, things are changing. And as people wake up to go, we can't have a we can't send some kid to prison for 30 years because he had pot and let somebody else off because they destroyed an entire nation. Come on, people. It's time to wake up to reality. The light of reality is light.
Now, Netflix has made a big controversy in the last few weeks with the creation of a gay Jesus by a comedy group in Brazil that was finally bombed in Christmas Eve with a couple of Molotovs. Gay Jesus, David, is that something that goes a little bit above one's sexual identity? It goes into complete heresy, and it's, of course, very disrespectful towards all Christians.
Well, my nickname at university was the heretic, so I've got to be a bit careful here. One thing, Leo, one thing I learned from your last book, I'm no supporter of this so-called one world religion, but the one thing I learned from your last book was that actually isn't what it is. It's a one world ideology with religious symbols.
That's right.
And you did that brilliantly in your last book. I learned a huge amount of what this so-called ersatz religion, what this false religion is trying to do. And I felt more enlightened when I put the book down. It was incredible.
Thank you.
Well, the Christ energy, the Christ consciousness. I mean, the one moment of transcendence, the one pure thing that Christians believe has entered the world and was unsullied by the world. I try and defend radical arts. In fact, my pedigree in this country, I suppose, has been 30 years of defending some quite radical and raw material. But, there is a point at which you think, well, no, it's simply offensive. It's not creative. It's not designed to do anything apart from outrage and make a fortune. I don't approve of people bombing anything. That's the old cuddly liberal in me. I apologize. But, there we are. Don't do it. It's wrong. Don't bomb people. Don't bomb things. But no, I mean, I don't think you could make a movie out of the gay Muhammad. I think if the other side of the equation, and I never know where I stand with this equation, am I the last British liberal? My God, there's a thought. Because I want to be fair to everybody. I want to give everybody a say, but I do believe there's a point beyond which one isn't probing and questing and inquiring into things anymore. It's just really that sacred quest in disguise. And I will see the movie. Someone has already asked me if I'd review, which I will consider. I've made it a point of principle never to review things I don't like. There's enough negativity in the world. Why shed more? but it will do an awful lot of convincing of me that this is art or insightful or a new perspective on the holy and the sacred and the transcendent, because I really can't see how it could be. Is it theoretically possible to talk about the sexuality of the Son of God? Maybe. But, you know, I think that would have to be done with such sophistication. Bearing in mind the subject matter, I would probably find it impossible. No, I mean, I'm not the supporter of this movie. I'm not the supporter of career-based religiosity, because it's not religiosity, it's something else. You know, it's making a quick buck. It's the service of mammon in disguise, and yet another way of dragging everything down into the cesspool of the wrong type of multiculturalism. I mean, so not at the risk of upsetting Leo, you know, I recently did a TEDx talk with my dear friend, the artist Haralampi Orozchikov, and I noticed the information that was going around was talking about us both as ardent multiculturalists, and I was thinking about that a great deal. Yes, I suppose that's true, but not this type of multiculturalism, not the type that denudes, not the type that reduces humanity in this sort of, what's that German concept, lumpen, you know, lumpen humanity, where there's no distinction, no glory, no honor, no beauty, no truth. No, there is nothing off the limit, out of the limits with art. There is nothing off the radar with art, but is it art or is it a career? And I suspect in this particular enterprise, we're only looking at some career-based decisions in disguise.
Well, I think that, you know, if you're talking about art, that's a whole different discussion. But when you're talking about dehumanizing human beings at the same time that they are being genocided throughout the Middle East, I think they're intertwined, and Christians are being genocided throughout the Middle East. And so when you come up with something to just that means to humiliate their faith, as you're doing that too, or as that's happening, I think that we can't divorce one from the other.
Yeah, Rosanna, lately in a modern art museum in Rome, it appeared this poster, I just wrote about it last week, of Jesus with an erection in front of a little boy. And this is what modern art is becoming, a constant attack on Christianity. And unfortunately, we have to see this happening in front of our eyes every day. You don't need to be a Christian to understand that an attack of Christianity like this will be impossible if instead than Christ you have Muhammad, and then it will be an attack on Islam. Now, if I put a little girl in front of Muhammad with an erection, which is actually historically accurate, because Muhammad had a girl he married when she was 6, then she was 9 when Muhammad actually brought her to bed. So it's accurate. She was a little girl in front of Muhammad with an erection. Now, if we portray this in a modern art museum, they will be all killed, just like Charlie Hebdo. So, I mean, what does...
There are lots and lots of memes all over cyberspace that do show that the memes are, meant to humiliate Muslim people, and they do show that. So it's not, it's there.
But it's not...
At the same time where Muslim people are in fear for their lives, in the Middle East and in other parts of the world too. We have to look at like the image and the word of humiliation, and that has a lot
here. Remember this modern art museum. I'm from Rome. This is a modern art museum in the center of Rome, next to the Vatican. So we are talking.
Well, maybe that, I don't know, but I mean, maybe the whole subject of pedophilia needs to be widely spoken of and a lot of light shined on it.
I think that this could be definitely also the subject of a more in-depth discussion in the future. We are running out of time. Of course, you have given us a lot of your time today, and we are very glad of it, Rosanna, because your contributions have been appreciated by our public and also by our panelists. What do you would like to say about the year 2020 to our viewers?
I'd like to say more than anything, it's not what you say, And it's not what you say you believe, it's what you do. Again, I know it's in the New Testament, faith without works is dead. But it's not what you say and what you go around posing as or anything else. It's what you actually do. And if you don't do anything to stop evil at its root, then you're part of it. And I think that that's it. And I think that I just want more light for everybody. More light, less separatism, more discussion, more human dignity, and less humiliation, and less I'm right and you're wrong, and more let's solve a problem.
Do you believe that in Hollywood, though, there is some people who are demonically possessed, that are beyond that need to actually have some kind of blessing to bring out these demons from within, because they are...
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It's every day. Oh, yeah. It's so common. That's why, you know, I had to not be there. And
it was polluting your spirit.
I saw so much. That would be 3 shows of what I've seen. But it's you know, they're very weak people that need to blackmail and use, and they're like snakes. They need the snake life instead of the light life. So it's a big subject. But yeah, I've seen it, and it's horrifying, and may it go down too.
Thank you, Roseanne. Thank you, John, for being with us. Thank you, Lowell. Thank you, David.
Thank you guys for putting up with me. I loved being here with y'all. Thank you.
Oh, well, you're welcome anytime. You have
Roseanne, why don't you run for Congress?
I know.
Yeah.
I know they told me to do that, but I'd have to.
The president, running for president's a bit of a step.
I know.
If you ran for Congress, maybe you could get rid of Schiff or somebody out there.
Absolutely. I tell you that California...
They told me to run for Mazie Hinono's seat in Hawaii because she's kind of weird.
What's your idea?
Then I'd have to get out of bed.
Okay. Aside from that, what's your idea of Tulsi Gabbard in Hawaii?
I really like Tulsi, but I don't like her. I don't like her foreign policy is whack. She's not right on that stuff, but she has some what do you call it, ovaries or whatever you want to call it. She has some guts, but it's all wrong on her foreign policies. Her foreign policy, par for the course, don't rock the boat, huh?
She's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, so that, in my book, disqualifies her.
There you go. Absolutely. I knew something was up with her with the stuff she
Now, the last question here that I want to make to you, Roseanne, is what do you think will happen after Trump is reelected? Do you think that just prior to that, the Libtards, Democrats will unleash hell on earth with all their Antifa groups, and we're going to inevitably go towards civil war? Or not?
Well, I think that's kind of, it seems like that's, you know, the writing on the wall of what they're pushing us to with all of this. But you know what I think is going to happen, because this is the 8th night of Hanukkah and we're all together and we're talking about this, and our words create reality. I think
we are projecting goodness.
Yes, I think what's going to happen is everybody's going to wake up and they're going to go, like that one guy, I can't remember his name, but they're going to go, we need to go to the inner cities and clean them up. Everybody come with me. Let's clean this up. Let's make sure children are safe everywhere. Let's make sure that our institutions are run, you know, according to our Constitution, the way, let us have the country we fought for, we love, and we died for. We'll have that in 2020 because the light of reality and the light of truth and the light of love, that's what's going to happen. That's how I see it. Everybody's going to be happy. Everything's going to go great. There's going to be no hatred. It's going to be removed. We're all going to work together. We're going to solve all the problems. All the kids will be happy. I'll be going to everybody's culture, Muslim, Christian, whatever, and I'm going to be eating great food with them.
And at this point, I want to ask all the members of our panel if you have any questions to Roseanne before we close the show. John?
Well, I already asked mine because I thought it'd be great if she ran for Congress, but I don't want to be so generous with your time.
Lowell, you have any question for Roseanne?
I put it in there. Thank you.
I'm speechless.
Okay, so Lowell is speechless. David, you have a last question for Roseanne?
Blasphemy is always a terrible thing. I need to get back to that on a different show. Roseanne, what do you think of the QAnon thing?
Ah, yeah.
Oh, that's so good. Did I get in trouble for tweeting about Q about 3 years, right when it started? I love Q. I love QAnon. I love that there are researchers. You know, you know, it's not everybody painting with a broad brush again, because a lot of them are real anti-Semitic, but the QAnon researchers who like are searching government facts and like real stuff, not mythological demons and all that stuff, they've done a great job to bring to the attention of the American people what really goes on in our name and with our money. And so, you know, God bless Q, stay above the fray and keep it coming. Keep loving, keep searching, keep connecting all those dots. And pretty soon it'll just hit tipping point and all the battle just float away.
Amen.
Thank you, Roseanne. And we probably going to see you.
I do think Trump is Q+.
I think that Roseanne is probably going to be with us again in the near future. I hope that you're going to agree in joining us again, Roseanne.
I'd love to. Thank you all so much. Happy Hanukkah, world!
Happy Hanukkah, world, and have a great New Year's Eve wherever you are around the world. And think positively, project positiveness is the message of Our Lady Roseanne. Thank you to Lowell in Jerusalem. Thanks to David, Father David in London, and thanks to John Barber in Detroit. May God bring all of us great things for the new year. And Amen. Thank you for tuning in, guys.